A single hat left in a Wisconsin ditch, a murder weapon sealed away for decades. These forgotten pieces just sent men to prison in 2025 for crimes most people thought would never be solved. In this investigation, DNA from scraps of evidence cracks open mysteries that haunted families for nearly half a century. If old clues now speak, what else is hiding in storage rooms, silently waiting to turn cold cases hot? In February 1974, a quiet stretch of road in Dunn County, Wisconsin, became the scene of a crime that would haunt investigators for decades. Mary Kay Schlase was 25 years old, an artist and a graduate student. She was last seen hitchhiking from Minneapolis, heading to an art show in Chicago. She never arrived. Her body was discovered near a rural ditch, and among the few clues left behind was a knitted hat collected by deputies who could not have known its future importance. For years, the case file grew heavier with witness leads, vehicle descriptions, and the names of possible suspects, but no arrests. The hat remained in evidence storage as technology advanced and investigators retired. Yet, as Sheriff Kevin Bigd later recalled, the case never collected dust. Each new generation of detectives returned to the evidence, hoping for a break. It would take nearly 50 years and a partnership with the investigative genetic genealogy team at Ramapo College in New Jersey to change everything. In 2023, forensic scientists extracted DNA from hairs preserved in the hat. The resulting single nucleotide polymorphism profile was uploaded to genealogy databases such as GEDmatch Pro and Family Tree DNA, searching for distant relatives. The process was painstaking, complicated further because the suspect's family tree was tangled by adoption. Researcher Karen Binder described it as a year-long effort, building and rebuilding family trees until the branches finally pointed to an unexpected name, John K. Miller, then 84 years old, living in Owatonna, Minnesota. On November 4, 2024, investigators confirmed the DNA match. That date would have been Mary's 76th birthday. When confronted by detectives, Miller admitted the hat was his and acknowledged his involvement. Sheriff Bigd later said, "It was an incredible feeling to send a message to former colleagues." After half a century, a suspect was in custody for Mary's killing. The arrest brought long-awaited answers to Mary's family and proved that even a single, well-preserved item can speak volumes decades after the crime. A different kind of evidence sat waiting in a police storage room almost 400 miles away. In 1983, Ronald Novak's case in Iowa left investigators with a handful of physical clues, a hammer, and the clothing Novak wore the night he was killed. Years passed. The original forensic tests yielded no answers. The chain of custody never broke. Every item remained sealed, tagged, and stored, untouched by time except for the slow march of technology. By 2025, the Lynn County Sheriff's Office had something their predecessors could only imagine: access to private labs equipped for the most advanced DNA analysis. DNA Labs International, known for handling difficult degraded samples, received the evidence. Their team of scientists began the painstaking process of extracting genetic material from the hammer's handle and the seams of Novak's clothing. These were not fresh samples. Decades of storage meant the DNA was fragmented and mixed with dust and trace contaminants. Yet next-generation sequencing protocols allowed the lab to recover enough single nucleotide polymorphisms to build a genealogical profile. The profile was uploaded to law enforcement portals on genealogy databases. Investigators worked with the lab report, tracing distant relatives and slowly narrowing the search. The name that surfaced was Michael S. Shepard, then 64. Surveillance and traditional police work followed. Once a reference DNA sample was collected and confirmed as a direct match to the crime scene profile, law enforcement moved quickly. On May 28, 2025, officers arrested Shopert in a coordinated operation. The arrest, years in the making, underscored the value of preserved physical evidence and the new capabilities private labs bring to cold case investigations. For the scientists at DNA Labs International, the moment was a quiet victory. Their work extracting a genetic fingerprint from fabric and metal, untouched for decades, had helped solve a case many believed would never close. For the Lynn County team, it was a reminder that even in the age of digital forensics, the most ordinary objects can hold the answers to extraordinary mysteries. In Mansfield, Ohio, the files on Deborah Lee Miller's 1981 homicide sat quietly for decades. Miller, just 18, had been found in her apartment. The weapon, a heavy oven grate, was left behind, its surface holding silent clues. For years, the evidence waited as investigators cycled through new leads and dead ends, but the case never left the minds of Mansfield detectives. When DNA technology advanced enough to revisit old evidence, the oven grate was submitted for retesting. This time, the results pointed to a name that had lingered in the background of the investigation: James Van Est, Miller's neighbor at the time of her death. Preserved evidence had finally yielded a lead. Detectives from the Mansfield Police Department moved to act on this new lead in 2024. As officers closed in, Van Est refused to surrender, which led to a tense standoff that lasted hours. Negotiators attempted to reach him by phone, urging a peaceful resolution, but Van Est did not respond. The standoff ended with Van Est's death before he could be brought to trial. For the officers who had worked the case and for Miller's family, the outcome was both relief and frustration. The evidence had finally spoken, but the chance to see justice served in court was lost. In January 2025, Mansfield police held a press conference to publicly name Van Est as Miller's killer. The department emphasized the role of preserved evidence and modern forensic science in reaching this conclusion. For many, the closure was bittersweet. Without a trial, questions remained about motive and the final hours of Miller's life. Yet the official naming of a suspect brought a measure of resolution to a case that had haunted the community for over 40 years. The decision to close the file on Miller's homicide set off a wider discussion about how law enforcement should handle cases where suspects die before they can face charges in court. In the late 1980s, forensic investigators in Colorado followed a routine that, at the time, seemed almost unremarkable. When a body was discovered along a rural road in Douglas County, technicians slipped paper bags over the victim's hands before transport. The goal was simple: preserve any trace evidence, fibers, skin cells, or other microscopic clues that might otherwise be lost. For years, those paper bags sat in storage, sealed and cataloged, as the case files grew cold. The victim, a woman in her early 30s, had been found after a violent attack, but all leads faded with time. Decades later, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, working with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, turned to those very bags in a last attempt to find answers. Advances in DNA technology meant that even the faintest biological residue could now be tested. Forensic analysts carefully opened the bags, swabbing the interior surfaces for any sign of touch, DNA. The process required patience and precision. Trace amounts, easily contaminated, demanded strict protocols and repeated quality checks. The results surprised even seasoned scientists. The DNA profile extracted from the bags was compared to a database of unsolved homicides. In 3 separate cases, all from the Denver metro area and dating to the same era, investigators had already linked samples to a single individual, Vincent Darrell Groves, a convicted serial offender whose crimes had haunted Colorado for years. The profile from the Douglas County evidence matched the Groves samples exactly. The connection was clear. Decades-old trace evidence, preserved by a standard forensic practice, had tied another unsolved homicide to a known serial killer. In December 2025, after careful review, Douglas County authorities announced that the case was considered resolved. The paper bags, once an afterthought, had held the key to a mystery that spanned nearly 40 years. Forensic analysts reflected on the outcome with a sense of awe. A simple act of evidence preservation, repeated countless times in labs across the country, had delivered justice in a case that once seemed destined to remain unsolved. In 1979, Esther Gonzalez's family gathered at the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, desperate for answers. The investigation followed the best practices of the time: witness interviews, canvassing, and crucially, the polygraph. Randy Williamson, the man who discovered Esther's body, sat for the test and passed. Investigators cleared him, and for decades that decision shaped the direction of the case. The evidence collected from the scene included biological material, carefully preserved as the years slipped by. As technology advanced, the limits of earlier investigative methods became more apparent. Polygraph results, once considered a strong indicator of truthfulness, came under scrutiny. Studies revealed that accuracy rates often fell far below what agencies had hoped, with some reviews suggesting little better than chance. Yet in 1979, the polygraph's authority was rarely questioned. It was not until 2024 that the preserved evidence was subjected to investigative genetic genealogy. The DNA profile built from semen found at the scene was uploaded to law enforcement portals on genealogy databases. The results pointed with unmistakable clarity to Randy Williamson, the very man cleared by polygraph decades before. By then, Williamson had been dead for a decade, having passed away in 2014. The announcement by Riverside County officials was met with a mix of relief and discomfort. For Esther's family, the truth brought long-awaited closure, but also a new wave of pain. The revelation forced a reckoning, not just with the facts of the case, but with the investigative tools that had failed them. For some, the decision to publicly name Williamson despite his death raised questions about privacy and the rights of the accused. Others emphasized the importance of transparency and the need to acknowledge hard truths no matter how much time has passed. The Gonzalez case now stands as a cautionary tale about the limits of historical methods like the polygraph and the profound impact that modern forensic science can have on both justice and memory. In Prince George's County, Maryland, a cold case from 1979 became the gold standard for how investigative genetic genealogy should be used. 18-year-old Catherine Donahue was abducted and killed while walking home, and the case stalled for decades despite careful evidence collection at the scene. What set this investigation apart was the unwavering commitment to procedure. Every item was sealed and logged, the chain of custody never broken, even as years passed and personnel changed. By 2025, the evidence still held its forensic value. Advances in DNA technology meant that biological material preserved from the original investigation could now be analyzed with far greater precision. The county cold case team, in partnership with a forensic laboratory, extracted a genetic profile suitable for single nucleotide polymorphism-based genealogy. This profile was uploaded to law enforcement portals on genealogy databases, searching for distant relatives who might provide a lead. Genealogists methodically built out family trees, cross-referencing public records and obituaries, narrowing their focus to individuals who matched the timeline and location. The process was deliberate and thorough, with every step documented for review. When the genetic trail pointed to Roger Zotis Brown, then 82, investigators moved carefully. They obtained a reference DNA sample and submitted it for traditional short tandem repeat analysis, the same type of direct comparison used in courtrooms nationwide. The match was confirmed, eliminating any doubt. On March 18, 2025, Prince George's County detectives arrested Brown and charged him with murder and abuse. Prosecutors and the lead detective described the case as a model for how modern tools and rigorous evidence handling can converge to deliver justice, even after nearly half a century. Every protocol from storage to confirmation was followed to the letter, providing a clear procedural benchmark for other agencies. The Donahue case stands as proof that the right combination of preserved evidence, advanced science, and careful genealogy can solve cases once thought unsolvable. In the spring of 2025, a cold case from Clark County, Washington, reached a turning point thanks to the specialized work of Othram, a private forensic lab. The case centered on Mary Ann Daniels, a 29-year-old woman who was found murdered in rural woods in 1987. For decades, the evidence preserved from that scene resisted all attempts at standard DNA analysis. The samples were degraded, broken down by time, the environment, and years of storage. Local detectives kept the case open, but traditional methods offered no path forward. Othram's team brought a new set of tools. Their laboratory specializes in recovering DNA from the most challenging samples, bone fragments, trace residues, and evidence considered unusable by older standards. Using proprietary repair and enrichment techniques, Othram scientists extracted enough genetic material from the evidence to build a high-density SNP profile. This profile, containing hundreds of thousands of markers, was then prepared for genealogical comparison. The lab spokesperson described the process as a blend of chemistry and detective work. Each step was documented, from the initial extraction to the final sequencing run. Once the genetic profile was ready, it was uploaded to law enforcement portals on genealogy databases to search for relatives who had opted in for comparison. The resulting matches allowed genealogists to construct family trees and narrow the search to a single name, Joseph Andrew Jaquez. With this lead in hand, Clark County detectives collected a reference DNA sample from Jaquez. Traditional forensic testing confirmed the match. In 2025, Jaquez was charged with murder and abuse in the Daniels case. For investigators, the breakthrough underscored how advances in private lab capabilities are reshaping what is possible in cold case investigations. Solving a cold case with genetic genealogy begins at the evidence table. Decades-old items, shirts, envelopes, scraps, are sent to private labs where DNA is coaxed from even the faintest traces. Technicians build a high-density single nucleotide polymorphism profile, known as SNP, capturing hundreds of thousands of genetic markers. Unlike the short tandem repeat profiles used in law enforcement databases, SNP profiles reveal connections far beyond immediate family, opening the door to distant relatives who may hold the key. This process, from extraction to SNP analysis, stretches over weeks or months, shaped by the quality of what is left behind. With the SNP profile in hand, genealogists turn to public databases like GED Match Pro and Family Tree DNA. Only those who have chosen to opt in for law enforcement searches are included. The search is for shared DNA segments, threads that hint at a shared ancestor, sometimes generations back. Building on these hints, genealogists map out family trees, cross-checking public records, and narrowing the field by age, geography, and circumstance. A lead alone is not enough. Investigators must collect a reference DNA sample from the person identified, often from a discarded object or a cheek swab. This sample undergoes short tandem repeat testing, known as STR, the standard for courtroom evidence. Only a match between the STR profile and the original crime scene DNA can close a case. Throughout, privacy is a constant concern. Forensic ethicists warn that every step depends on participant consent and strict lab oversight. Contracts restrict DNA use to specific cases, with audits in place, yet questions about data retention and future standards remain unresolved. Today, DNA and genealogy turn silent evidence into answers, even after decades. As technology advances, justice no longer fades with time. It adapts, reaching farther into the past and reshaping how we view cold cases. But every new solve also raises questions about privacy and power. The pursuit of truth continues, one strand at a time. What would you want uncovered if it were your family's story?